The transport station hung in space like a dying ember, its lights flickering weakly against the endless void. Raya pressed her scaled hand against the cold viewport, the metal so frozen it burned against her palm. Outside, the debris field drifted past in terrible silence. Twisted metal that had once been starships. Scorched hull plates bearing her clan's insignia. Bodies frozen in the vacuum, preserved in their final moments of terror. She stood 12 feet tall, her body designed for war and honor. Her iridescent scales had once shimmered like polished gemstones, catching light and reflecting it in colors that told the story of her lineage. Now they were dull like tarnished copper left too long in the rain. Exhaustion weighted every muscle. Despair settled in her chest like a stone. The Draconians had served the Galactic Coalition for 300 years. 3 centuries of loyalty. Her people had been warriors, defenders, protectors of the weak. They'd fought in 17 major conflicts, lost countless soldiers defending Coalition worlds. Raya herself had earned 32 commendations for valor. She'd commanded fleets. She'd saved entire planets. And in a single night, they'd been declared traitors. A political conspiracy she'd learned later. Some Coalition official needed a scapegoat for a failed military operation. Someone to blame when billions of credits went missing. The Draconians, proud and honor-bound, had refused to lie for corrupt politicians. So they'd been erased instead. Her entire clan executed. Not in battle where warriors deserved to fall, but in dark rooms by faceless bureaucrats. Her mother, her brothers, her sisters in arms. All gone. Their names struck from records. Their service forgotten. Their existence denied. Raya had only survived because she'd been off-world, commanding a routine supply mission to the outer territories. Just delivering medical equipment and food rations. Nothing glorious. Nothing important. When she'd returned, jumping back into Coalition space with cargo holds full of supplies, she'd found her homeworld ringed by warships. Quarantine they'd called it. Containment of a threat. The communication had been brief and cold. Her military honors stripped. Her clan's assets seized. Her people eliminated. Bounties posted on every surviving Draconian. Shoot on sight orders. The coalition she'd bled for, the government she'd trusted with her life, had erased her people from history like they'd never existed at all. 3 months ago that had been. 3 months of running, hiding, selling everything she owned just to survive. The trading post on Epsilon Station smelled like decay and broken dreams. The air recyclers barely worked, leaving everything thick with the stench of too many species crammed into too little space. Desperation had its own smell, Raya had learned. Sour and sharp, it clung to everything. She'd sold the last piece of her ceremonial armor that morning. A shoulder guard bearing her clan's flame insignia, forged by her grandfather's hands, worn by 3 generations of warriors. The merchant, some gray-skinned species she didn't recognize, had barely glanced at it. Just weighed the metal and tossed her a credit chip worth maybe 3 days of food. Maybe. The merchant hadn't even looked at her face. Nobody did anymore. Raya wandered through the lower levels, the forgotten places where the station's poorest lived. Other species saw her coming and moved away. Some spat at her shadow. Others just crossed to the far side of the corridor, pressing against the walls, fear and hatred in their eyes. Traitor, their look said. Monster. Killer. Her body was failing. Malnutrition made each step feel like climbing a mountain. Her scales, which should have been vibrant and strong, had started to crack at the edges. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a full meal. The proud warrior who'd once commanded battle fleets now stumbled through garbage-strewn passages, barely able to stand upright. The corridor spun. Her vision blurred. Raya reached for the wall, but her hand found only air. In a forgotten corner of the station, where even the lights had given up, Raya's legs finally gave out. She collapsed against a bulkhead, her back scraping against riveted metal. Her breathing came shallow and fast. Her hearts, both of them, hammered irregular rhythms in her chest. This was it then. This was how it ended. Not in glorious battle. Not defending the innocent. Not with honor. She would die here, alone in the dark, on a forgotten station where nobody knew her name. Nobody would sing songs of her deeds. Nobody would remember she'd ever existed. Just another dead alien in a galaxy that didn't care. She thought of her mother's last message, sent hours before the execution. Be strong, little flame. Your fire burns bright. But there was no fire left. Just ash and cold. As darkness crept into the edges of her vision, her hearing started to fade. But through the growing silence, she thought she heard something. Footsteps. Light ones, quick and purposeful. Not the heavy tread of station security. Something smaller. Human footsteps, maybe. She'd heard about them. The new species. Young and strange. Raya tried to lift her head to see who approached, but her strength was gone. The darkness swallowed her whole and she knew nothing more. Consciousness returned slowly like climbing out of deep water. Raya's eyes opened to unfamiliar surroundings. Her first instinct was panic. This wasn't the station. This wasn't the cold corner where she'd collapsed. This was a cargo bay, clean and organized in a way that spoke of someone who actually cared about their space. The walls were metal but painted, not the bare industrial gray of most ships. The lighting was soft, warm even. She lay on blankets. Real blankets, not the recycled fiber sheets found on stations. They smelled of soap and something warm she couldn't identify. Something that reminded her of safety, though she couldn't explain why. Every instinct in her warrior's body screamed danger. She was vulnerable. Exposed. Someone had moved her while she was unconscious. Easy there. You've been out for 2 days. Raya's head snapped toward the voice so fast her neck cracked. A human stood about 10 feet away, keeping a careful distance. He held a metal canteen in one hand and what looked like ration bars in the other. He was small by galactic standards, maybe 6 feet tall, which made him barely half her height. Brown hair, a bit messy like he'd just woken up. Brown eyes that held an expression she didn't recognize. Not fear. Every species she'd encountered in the past 3 months had looked at her with fear. Not greed either, though bounty hunters had tracked her twice already. This was something else. Something that made her chest feel strange. Concern. He looked concerned. Who are you? Her voice came out as a rasp, her throat dry as desert sand. Jake Harper. This is my ship, the Wanderer. He gestured around the cargo bay with the hand holding the ration bars. Found you collapsed on Epsilon Station, down in the lower levels. You were in pretty bad shape. Figured you could use some help. He moved slowly, deliberately, like someone approaching a nervous animal. He set the water and food on a crate within her reach, then stepped back. Giving her space. Giving her control. No strings attached, he added. Just help. Raya stared at him. Her mind raced through possibilities, searching for the trap. Humans were new to the galactic community. Barely a century since first contact, which was nothing in cosmic terms. Most species considered them curiosities at best. Dangerous unknowns at worst. They didn't follow normal patterns. They formed emotional attachments to things that weren't even alive. They kept animals as companions. They cried over fictional stories. They were weird. Why? The question came out more aggressive than she intended. Jake shrugged, a very human gesture she'd seen in station broadcasts. You needed help. I could give it. Pretty simple math. Simple math. As if saving a wanted fugitive, a member of a supposedly traitorous species, was just basic arithmetic. As if there weren't a dozen reasons this could destroy him. Harboring a fugitive was a serious crime. The Coalition didn't forgive that kind of thing. She wanted to distrust him. Needed to find the angle, the trap, the inevitable betrayal. But her body had other priorities. Hunger clawed at her stomach. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Her hands shook. Raya reached for the canteen. The water was cool, clean, and she had to force herself not to gulp it down. She drank slowly, letting it soothe her throat. Then she picked up the ration bars. They were plain, basic nutrition blocks of the kind found on every cargo ship in the galaxy. No flavor, just compressed proteins and nutrients. They tasted like salvation. I'll leave at the next station, Raya said, her voice already stronger. The water and food were working magic on her depleted system. You're injured. Rest first. We'll figure it out. Jake moved toward the cargo bay door, then paused. He looked back at her, and that strange concern was still in his eyes. Oh, and Raya? That's the name on your identification chip. If you want to be called something else, just let me know. He left her alone with her confusion and, for the first time in months, a full stomach. Over the following days, Raya learned about Jake Harper. He ran independent freight through the outer reaches, the dangerous territories where the Coalition's law barely reached. Places too risky or unprofitable for the big corporate haulers. He carried medical supplies to colonies that couldn't afford premium shipping. He transported agricultural equipment to frontier worlds. He moved things people needed, not things that made the most profit. He worked alone. Lived alone. Apparently had a talent for finding trouble and an even stranger talent for getting out of it. And he treated her like a person. Not a monster. Not a weapon to be used or feared. Not a political liability to be managed. A person. It was such a simple thing, but Raya had forgotten what it felt like. When she tried to stay hidden in the cargo bay, Thinking he'd want her out of sight, Jake just brought food 3 times a day. He'd set it down, sometimes chat about his day, then leave. No pressure. No demands. When she finally offered to help with ship repairs, desperate to repay the debt she felt growing, Jake accepted gratefully. He showed her how human systems worked, explaining the differences from coalition standard designs. Human technology was newer, sometimes cruder, but surprisingly effective. They built things to last, to be repaired easily. Nothing fancy, just solid engineering. He played something he called music from Earth while they worked. Strange melodic sounds that filled the empty spaces of the ship. Some of it was fast and energetic. Some was slow and sad. All of it was beautiful in ways Raya couldn't explain. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" Raya asked one evening. They were in the engine room, Jake lying on his back under a cooling unit that kept acting up. She held the tools, handing them to him when he asked. Jake slid out from under the unit, genuinely puzzled. "Should I be? My people are declared traitors. There are bounties on our heads. I could," she struggled for words. "I could hurt you. Turn on you. Bring danger to your ship." "Could what?" Jake sat up, wiping grease off his hands. "You've been here a week and the worst thing you've done is drink all my coffee." He grinned and it transformed his whole face. Made him look younger. "Besides, I figure if someone helps fix my ship instead of stealing it or breaking it, they're probably okay." Raya didn't understand this human. His logic made no sense by galactic standards. He risked everything on assumptions that seemed based more on hope than evidence. But for the first time since the fall of her people, since watching her world burn, since losing everything she'd ever known, Raya felt something other than despair. She felt curious, and maybe, just maybe, the tiniest spark of hope. 3 weeks became a month, and Raya watched her reflection in the Wanderer's polished metal surfaces change day by day. Her scales began to regain their luster, the dull copper brightening back toward the iridescent shimmer she remembered from before the fall. Regular meals worked miracles. Her strength returned. The cracks at the edges of her scales healed. She could move without exhaustion dragging at every step. She proved surprisingly adept with technical work. Warrior training wasn't just about fighting. Every draconian soldier learned emergency ship repairs, field medicine, survival skills. When a power coupling blew in the navigation system, Raya had it fixed before Jake even realized there was a problem. When the waste recycler started making horrible grinding noises, she diagnosed the issue in minutes. Jake taught her about human culture in return. He showed her Earth movies, strange visual stories that humans watched for entertainment. Some made her laugh. Others made her cry, which embarrassed her until Jake admitted he cried at them too. He introduced her to human music beyond what he played while working. There were thousands of styles, he explained, each one expressing different emotions, different stories. And then there was breakfast. "So humans eat this every morning?" Raya examined the plate skeptically. 2 eggs, cooked until the whites were solid but the yolks still soft. 2 pieces of bread, browned by heat. Some kind of preserved meat that smelled salty and savory. "Most of us. It's a tradition thing." Jake poured them both coffee, the bitter earth drink she'd grown addicted to over the past weeks. "You don't have to eat it if you don't want to. I know different species have different." She tried the eggs. The yolk broke, golden and rich. The taste was simple but satisfying. She tried the toast, crunchy on the outside and soft inside. Then the bacon, which was probably the best thing she'd ever put in her mouth. "Your species is strange," Raya said, taking another bite. "You take simple ingredients and make them into rituals. Celebrations. You eat the same thing every morning not because you have to, but because it means something. You have no idea." Jake laughed, that easy sound that still surprised her every time. "Wait until I tell you about Thanksgiving. We spend an entire day cooking food, gather everyone we care about and eat until we can't move. Then we complain about eating too much while planning what to eat next." Raya found herself making a sound she hadn't made in months. A chuckle. It rumbled up from her chest, foreign and familiar all at once. Jake's grin widened, and they ate breakfast together in comfortable silence. But even as the days passed, even as she grew stronger and the ship began to feel like home, Raya remained vigilant. This couldn't last. She was a liability, a walking target. Every port they docked at, she expected coalition security. Every ship that passed too close made her tense. She was a danger to anyone who harbored her, and Jake had already risked too much. She told herself she'd leave at the next major port. Find her own way. Disappear into the outer reaches where the coalition's reach was weakest. She practiced the speech in her head. "Thank you for everything. I'll never forget your kindness. But I have to go." She never got the chance. The Wanderer's proximity alarms screamed to life without warning. Raya was in the cargo bay organizing supplies when the sound ripped through the ship. Jake's voice came through the intercom, tight with tension. "Raya, we've got company." She reached the bridge in seconds. Through the viewport, a coalition cruiser hung in space like a predator. Massive, armed, powerful enough to vaporize the Wanderer without even straining its weapons systems. Raya's blood went cold. Both her hearts hammered against her ribs. The communication channel crackled open. "Cargo vessel Wanderer, this is Coalition patrol ship Resolute. Cut your engines and prepare for inspection. We're searching for a fugitive Draconian. Power down your engines immediately and prepare to be boarded." Jake's face went carefully blank. He looked at Raya and she saw the calculation happen behind his eyes. Saw him understand exactly what this meant. The danger she'd brought to his door. The risk he'd been taking every single day. She stood, her decision already made. "I'll surrender. Tell them I stowed away. That you didn't know." "Oh. Stay in the cargo bay," Jake said quietly. His voice was calm, but she heard steel underneath. "Jake, I won't let you risk." "Raya." He turned to face her fully. "Trust me. Please." The word stopped her mid-sentence. Trust. Such a simple word. Such a huge ask. When had anyone asked for her trust? When had she given it to anyone outside her clan? Her hand hesitated on the door frame. "Please," Jake repeated. "I've got this. Just trust me." She hid in the cargo bay, tucked behind shipping containers and supply crates. Through the intercom she heard everything. The docking clamps engaging. The airlock cycling. Boots on the deck plates. 3 officers, maybe 4. And then she heard Jake lie with astonishing ease. "Morning, officers. What can I do for you?" His voice was friendly, casual, like he welcomed coalition inspections every day. "We're searching for a fugitive. A Draconian. Reports indicate she might be in this sector." "A Draconian? On my ship?" Jake laughed and it sounded completely genuine. "I run medical supplies to the outer colonies. Not exactly the kind of cargo that attracts company, if you know what I mean. Pretty boring route, actually." Raya heard him accessing the ship's computers, calling up manifests. She heard him misdirecting the officers away from the cargo bay, suggesting they check the engine room instead. "I mean, I guess someone could hide back there, but it gets hot as hell. Pardon my language." He charmed them. That was the only word for it. He joked about the loneliness of solo freight runs. He complained about the temperamental cooling system. He offered them coffee, which they declined, but the offer itself seemed to relax them. "You haven't seen any Draconians, then?" The officer's voice was suspicious. Jake's response didn't waver. "Haven't seen any. Just hauling medical supplies to the outer colonies. You know how it is. Someone's got to do the boring runs." 20 minutes. That's how long the inspection lasted. 20 minutes of Raya holding her breath, her claws digging into her palms. 20 minutes of Jake Harper lying to coalition officers, falsifying manifests, risking everything for someone he'd known for barely a month. Finally, Boots retreated. The airlock cycled. The docking clamps released. The coalition cruiser pulled away, jumping to hyperspace in a flash of distorted light. Raya emerged from hiding on shaking legs. She found Jake at the controls, staring out at empty space. His hands trembled slightly as they gripped the console. The reality of what he just risked hit her like a physical blow. He could have lost everything. The coalition didn't forgive harboring fugitives. They could have arrested him, confiscated his ship, his livelihood, his freedom. Years in prison. His whole life destroyed. For her. Why? Her voice cracked. "You could have lost everything. Everything, Jake. Why would you?" Jake turned to face her. His expression was fierce, protective, almost angry. "Your crew now. We protect our own. That's how humans work." "I'm not human. Doesn't matter." He stood, meeting her eyes despite having to crane his neck back to do it. Despite being half her size. Despite every logical reason to be afraid. "Your family. And family doesn't abandon family. Ever. Family." The word hit her like a shockwave. It was a knife and a bomb all at once. It cut through every defense she'd built and healed wounds she'd thought were permanent. Raya felt something crack inside her chest. The armor she'd built around her shattered heart, the walls she'd constructed to survive, the distance she'd maintained to protect herself from more loss. All of it cracked and crumbled. For the first time since she'd watched her people burn, since her world had been destroyed, since everything had been taken from her, Raya let herself hope. And this time the hope didn't feel like a lie. The message came through 3 days later, crackling across the Wanderer's communication system just after breakfast. Raya was cleaning the dishes, another human ritual she'd adopted, when Jake's voice called out from the bridge. Got an emergency contract. Colony on the edge of human space needs medical supplies. Raiders are hitting them hard. Raya dried her hands and headed to the bridge. Jake was already pulling up coordinates, his fingers flying across the navigation console. The contract details scrolled across the screen. Emergency medicine. Plasma for transfusions. Surgical equipment. The colony was paying triple the normal rates for immediate delivery. We're closest. We can make it in 6 hours if we push the engines. Jake was already plotting the course, his decision made. Raya studied the coordinates and ice flooded her veins. Her eyes caught on one detail in the threat assessment. Her breath stopped in her chest. Jake. Those raiders. They're Kreth mercenaries. Okay. He glanced up at her, not understanding why her voice had gone flat. The Kreth. She stopped, forced herself to breathe to steady her voice. The Kreth were hired to destroy my fleet. They're the ones who killed my people. I watched them fire on evacuation ships. On vessels full of families, children, civilians trying to escape. They laughed while they did it. The color drained from Jake's face. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by regret. We can take a different contract. Raya, I won't ask you to face them. We can turn around right now. There are other ships, There are civilians at that colony. Jake stopped mid-sentence. Yes. Children? Probably. His voice was quiet. It's a farming colony. Families. About 300 people total. Raya looked at the star map floating between them. The colony was a tiny dot in vast emptiness. She looked at the threat assessment. 3 Kreth Raider ships. Heavy weapons. No mercy. She thought of her clan, of the warrior code carved into her soul since childhood. Honor. Protection. Duty. She thought of this human who had given her back her life when she had nothing left. We're going, she said. They arrived to chaos. The colony was a small collection of domes on a frontier world, farms spreading out around the main settlement. 3 Kreth Raider ships circled overhead like vultures, their weapons fire raining down on failing shields. The colony's defense grid was basic, barely military grade. It was never meant to handle this kind of assault. The Wanderer dropped out of hyperspace right into the middle of it all. Alarms screamed. Proximity warnings flashed red across every screen. Hold on. Jake threw the ship into a dive that would have torn a lesser pilot apart. The Wanderer wasn't a warship. It was a cargo hauler designed for efficiency, not combat. But Jake flew like he'd been born in a cockpit, weaving through weapons fire, spinning and diving in patterns that should have been impossible. Energy blasts streaked past the viewport, close enough that Raya could see the heat distortion. Jake drew the raiders' attention away from the colony's defense grid, making the Wanderer the most tempting target in the sky. Raya, I need you on the cargo bay doors. Jake shouted over the scream of engines. We're going to make a supply drop. We're in the middle of a battle. Exactly. They won't expect it. Raya stared at him for one heartbeat, then laughed. Actually laughed, the sound bursting out of her chest. This was humanity. Absolutely reckless. Completely brilliant. Utterly impossible. And somehow it might just work. She ran to the cargo bay, fired up the release systems, and when Jake gave the signal, she opened the doors. Medical supplies dropped in reinforced containers, parachutes deploying as they fell toward the colony. The colonists would have what they needed to treat their wounded. But it wasn't enough. Through the monitors, Raya watched the raiders break through the colony's perimeter shields. Kreth soldiers, 9 feet tall and armored in black combat suits, descended in drop pods. They advanced on civilian shelters with weapons raised. She saw families trying to run, parents carrying children, elderly people stumbling. She saw a little girl, maybe 5 years old, crying over someone who wasn't moving. Something ignited in Raya's chest. Something that had been cold and dead for months. Her warrior's heart, the core of who she was, roared back to life like flames and dry tinder. Jake. Open the airlock. What? His voice crackled through the intercom, confused and alarmed. Raya found the pieces of armor she'd kept hidden in the back of the cargo bay. The few weapons she hadn't sold. A combat blade. A damaged plasma pistol. The shoulder guard she'd bought back from that merchant with her first month's pay from Jake. She strapped them on with practiced efficiency, muscle memory taking over. Open the airlock. And keep them off me. Raya, you can't go down there alone. There's too many of them. She looked up at the camera, knowing Jake could see her. This small human who had saved her when she had nothing. Who had fed her, sheltered her, protected her, given her a home. You said we protect our own. That colony is under your protection. Which means it's under mine. Through the intercom she heard Jake's breath catch. Then understanding and pride flashed across his face on the monitor. He nodded. Give them hell. The airlock opened. Raya dropped from the Wanderer like a meteor falling to Earth. The Kreth had last seen her as a broken refugee. Starving. Desperate. Defeated. They'd forgotten what Draconians were. They'd forgotten that her people were warriors bred for combat, trained from birth in every weapon and fighting style, forged in honor and flame across 1,000 years of tradition. They remembered now. Raya hit the ground and rolled, coming up with her blade already in motion. The first Kreth soldier went down before he even saw her. The second turned, brought his weapon up, but her claws were faster. She tore through their lines like a living storm, scales deflecting their weapons' fire, her combat training taking over. Every move was precise, efficient, deadly. Above her, Jake provided cover fire. The Wanderer wasn't armed for combat, but Jake used what he had. He buzzed the raiders at dangerous speeds, forcing them to break formation. He used the ship's thrusters to knock drop pods off course. He flew patterns that would make military pilots weep with envy. Together, human and Draconian, they turned the tide. When the last raider retreated, their ships limping away into hyperspace, Raya stood in the colony square. Her breath came hard and fast. Her scales were scorched in places, cracked in others. But they gleamed in the setting sun, iridescent and proud. Colonists emerged from shelters, staring at her with a mixture of awe and fear and gratitude. Children peeked from behind their parents. Someone started clapping. Then another. Then everyone. Jake landed the Wanderer and ran to her, his face split by a huge grin. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Raya felt something break inside her. The last wall around her heart, the final piece of armor protecting her from feeling anything, it shattered like glass. She collapsed to her knees and for the first time since her clan's death, since watching her world burn, she wept. Jake sat beside her without hesitation. This tiny human next to a 12-foot warrior, and he simply stayed. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't offer empty words. Just stayed. I failed them, Raya whispered through tears. My people. I wasn't there when they needed me. I couldn't save them. That wasn't your fault. I was their commander. Their protector. I should have. Jake's hand found her scaled arm, warm and solid. You can't protect people from betrayal and politics and conspiracies. That's not on you. But today? Today you saved hundreds. Your people would be proud. The sobs racked her entire frame. Jake waited, patient as starlight. Finally, when the tears stopped, he said the words that changed everything. You didn't deserve what happened. None of your people did. And Raya? He squeezed her arm gently. You're not alone anymore. You're home now. He met her eyes. You've always been home. Home. The word settled into her chest like an ember-catching flame, spreading warmth through her entire being. Word spread faster than hyperspace could carry it. A human trader and his draconian partner. Heroes who saved a farming colony from Kreth raiders. A warrior who had regained her honor. The story rippled through the outer reaches like wildfire, passed from station to station, ship to ship, mouth to mouth. Within weeks, the Wanderer's communication systems lit up with messages. Draconians. Scattered across the galaxy, hiding in forgotten corners, desperate and alone. They'd heard the story. They'd heard there was hope. They were seeking refuge. Jake's response was characteristically human. He read the first message, looked at Raya and shrugged. Well, we've got cargo space. The Wanderer became a sanctuary. The first refugee was an elderly draconian named Keth, who'd been hiding on a mining station for 4 months. Jake picked him up personally, gave him a warm meal, and helped him contact his daughter on a distant world. The second was a young female barely past adolescence, scared and starving. Raya held her while she cried. Other ships joined them. Humans mostly. Cargo haulers like Jake who heard the story and decided they had room for one more. A small fleet of misfits and refugees formed, united by nothing more than the belief that doing the right thing mattered. Jake coordinated with Earth's diplomatic corps, made calls to people he knew, pulled favors he'd earned over years of reliable freight runs. He helped Draconians find legitimate work. He negotiated safe passages through dangerous space. He connected families separated by the purge. What started as one human helping one refugee became something bigger. A movement. A statement that the coalition's judgment wasn't the final word. the Coalition noticed. 6 months after the colony rescue, a Coalition cruiser intercepted them at a trade station. Raya saw it drop out of hyperspace and felt her heart skip. But this time she didn't feel the crushing fear. She didn't think about running or hiding. A Centaurian admiral appeared on the communication screen, his 4 eyes cold and official. "Cargo vessel Wanderer, you are ordered to stand down. We need to speak with the Draconian known as Raya of the Flamescale clan." She stood on the Wanderer's bridge, Jake beside her, and felt no fear. The warrior who had collapsed alone on a forgotten station was gone. Burned away like dead wood. In her place stood someone who had found her fire again. Someone who had remembered who she was. "I'm here," Raya said, her voice steady. "Raya of the Flamescale clan," the admiral intoned with formal gravity. "You are wanted for—" "I'm aware of the charges," Raya interrupted. "And I'm aware they're false. So unless you have new evidence, we have nothing to discuss." The admiral's expression tightened. "The Coalition has declared." The Coalition was wrong. Jake stepped forward, and despite being a fraction of the admiral's size, he was utterly unmovable. "And we have testimony from 3 colonies, 2 independent trading guilds, and Earth's diplomatic corps that says so. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have documentation of the conspiracy that used the Draconians as scapegoats." The admiral's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Earth's diplomatic corps?" A new voice cut across the channel. Human, female, calm and professional. "This is Ambassador Chen of Earth's Outer Reach delegation. We've compiled extensive evidence that the charges against the Draconian people were politically motivated and factually baseless. We're prepared to present this evidence to the Coalition Council. We're also prepared to offer political asylum to any Draconian who requests it, under the protection of Earth and her allies." The admiral looked between Raya, Jake, and the growing fleet of ships surrounding the Wanderer. Other cargo haulers. Refugee transports. Even a few colony defense ships that had joined as escorts. Humans had entered galactic politics barely a century ago. They were supposed to be minor players. Cautious. Weak. Irrelevant. The galaxy had forgotten something important about humans. They formed bonds that defied logic. They protected their own with a ferocity that made ancient warrior races look tame. They didn't abandon family. Ever. 3 weeks later, the Coalition Council issued a formal apology. The investigation was reopened. The real conspirators were arrested. The charges against the Draconian people were dropped, their names cleared. Reparations were offered. The galaxy's official stance shifted from condemnation to sympathy, almost overnight. Raya received a personal message from Earth's Defense Command. They offered her a position, a command rank in Earth's expanding fleet. Ships. Soldiers. Authority. A position of honor, of power, of vindication. Everything she'd lost. Everything she'd spent her life working toward. She stood in the Wanderer's cargo bay and read the offer 3 times. The bay had been modified to accommodate her height now. Jake had installed higher ceilings, reinforced the deck plating where she walked most often. There were personal touches everywhere. Her clan's recovered insignia hung in a place of honor. A collection of Earth movies filled a shelf. 2 coffee mugs, 1 human-sized and 1 scaled up for Draconian hands. "You should take it," Jake said, appearing with both mugs filled. "The ritual they developed over months. It's everything you lost. Everything you deserve to have back." Raya took her coffee, holding the warm mug in both hands. "Do you want me to take it? I want you to be happy. If that means commanding a fleet for Earth, then yeah. You'd be amazing at it. And if it means staying here?" Jake's grin was immediate and genuine. "Then I'd say I'm the luckiest cargo hauler in the galaxy. But Raya, don't stay because you feel like you owe me. That's not." "I don't owe you," Raya interrupted gently. She looked around the cargo bay. At the modifications they'd made together. At the movie collection. At the spare parts organized exactly how she liked them. At the small kitchen area where they made breakfast every morning. "I stay because I want to. Because this is home." She thought of the other Draconians they'd helped find their way. The colonies they'd delivered supplies to. The strange, impossible family they'd built from nothing but kindness and stubbornness. She thought of the human word home, and how it had taken her so long to understand it. "I'm already where I belong," Raya said. The Wanderer jumped to hyperspace an hour later, carrying its crew of 2. A human cargo hauler and a Draconian warrior, heading toward the next port, the next adventure, the next person who needed help. The next family member they hadn't met yet. In the observation deck, Raya stood beside Jake, watching stars streak past in ribbons of light. The Draconians had an old saying, passed down through generations of warriors. Home is where your fire burns brightest. She'd finally learned what humans had known all along, what they tried to teach the galaxy through every inexplicable action, every illogical kindness, every time they chose compassion over convenience. Home isn't a place you find on a map. It isn't coordinates in space or a planet with your name on it. Home is the people who see you at your worst and stay anyway. Home is the ones who fan your flames when they're dying and celebrate when they roar back to life. Home is whoever refuses to let you burn alone. Raya looked at Jake, this small human who'd given her back everything without asking for anything in return, and smiled. She was home. She'd been home for a while now. And her fire had never burned brighter.